Carla stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her in a simple dress and worn-out sneakers. For a woman who was used to tailored suits and designer heels, today's outfit felt almost foreign. But it was necessary. She was about to put her employees to the ultimate test. As the owner of one of the most prestigious luxury boutiques in the city, Carla had built her business from the ground up. Her boutique was known for its high-end fashion and celebrity clientele. But lately, she had been hearing whispers, rumors of her employees treating certain customers poorly based on their appearance or skin color. And that was something she couldn't tolerate. She took one last look at herself, adjusting the plain scarf that covered her hair, before grabbing her small, worn handbag. Today, she wouldn't be Carla, the successful businesswoman. Today, she would be just another customer. Stepping out of her car, Carla felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she approached the large glass doors of her store. The gold lettering on the front proudly displayed the name she had given it, a name she had chosen carefully to reflect both elegance and strength. She hesitated for a moment, breathing deeply before pushing open the door. The cool air of the boutique greeted her, along with the faint smell of expensive perfumes and leather. Inside, everything was just as she had designed it. Polished floors, sleek displays, and sparkling chandeliers. But today, she wasn't here to admire the aesthetics. As she walked in, Carla noticed the glances from the staff. It was subtle at first, just quick looks of disinterest, maybe a slight frown. She approached a display of handbags, running her fingers over the smooth leather, waiting for someone to assist her. Minutes passed, and no one came. A couple entered the store behind her, dressed in designer clothes, and almost immediately, a young sales associate rushed over to greet them. Carla watched as the couple was offered drinks, shown the latest arrivals, and treated with the utmost care. Meanwhile, she continued to be ignored. Her heart sank, but she kept her composure. She had expected this, hadn't she? This was exactly why she had come. But it was still hard to witness, especially in her own store. Carla moved towards another section, hoping to catch the attention of one of the staff members. She finally locked eyes with a saleswoman near the register, but the woman quickly looked away, as if uninterested. Carla walked over anyway, determined to make contact. "Excuse me, can you help me with something?" she asked politely. The saleswoman barely glanced at her before sighing. "I'm busy at the moment. Someone will be with you shortly," she said dismissively. Carla's chest tightened. There was no rush of customers. The store wasn't even busy. Yet, here she was being brushed off as if she didn't matter. She felt anger simmering inside her, but she swallowed it down. This was only the beginning of the test. She wandered through the store, trying to stay calm, but the more she was ignored, the more the frustration built. Finally, she decided to approach one of the men working near the back. He was adjusting a display, and she thought maybe he would be different. "Excuse me," she said again, trying to keep her tone light. He glanced over at her, then looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her simple clothes and her dark skin. His expression was unreadable, but his next words made it clear how little he thought of her. "Are you sure you're in the right store?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Carla's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out at first. She had expected bad treatment, but this was worse than she had imagined. "I'm just looking," she managed to say. "Well, let me know if you find anything in your price range," he said, already turning away. Carla stood there for a moment, stunned. Her mind raced with thoughts, but she forced herself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to reveal herself. Not yet. There was more to see, and she wasn't done testing them. With a deep breath, she turned and walked toward the back of the store, feeling the weight of their judgments heavy on her shoulders. Carla moved deeper into the boutique, her pulse quickening as the reality of the situation sank in. She had expected to be treated differently, yes, but this level of disregard was jarring. Every step she took felt heavier, as if the weight of her employee's judgment followed her across the polished marble floor. She found herself in the jewelry section, admiring a sparkling array of diamond necklaces and gold bracelets. These were the kinds of pieces that her wealthier clients adored, items she had selected personally for their timeless beauty. Carla knew the price of each item by heart, but as she ran her fingers lightly over a particularly striking necklace, she sensed someone watching her. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a young saleswoman standing nearby, arms crossed, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. Carla turned toward her, hoping that perhaps this would be the employee who would break the pattern, who would approach her with respect and professionalism. But instead, the saleswoman sighed loudly and stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Is there something you're looking for?" she asked, her tone cold and detached. Carla looked up, catching the woman's gaze, and offered a small smile. "Yes, I was wondering if you could tell me more about this necklace." The saleswoman glanced at the necklace, barely giving it a second look before returning her focus to Carla. "That piece," she said slowly, "is from one of our most exclusive collections. I'm not sure it's suitable for you." Carla raised an eyebrow, taken aback by the audacity of the remark. "And why wouldn't it be?" she asked, her voice calm but with a subtle edge. The woman hesitated for a moment, but the look of disdain never left her face. "It's just quite expensive," she replied, almost as if the words were meant to warn Carla off. "You might want to start with something more affordable." Carla's heart skipped a beat. She had always known that prejudice lingered beneath the surface in many places, even in her own world of high fashion and luxury. But hearing it spoken so plainly, so unapologetically, was like a punch to the gut. The irony of the moment was almost too much to bear. Here she was, the owner of this very store, being judged and dismissed because of the clothes she wore and the color of her skin. "Maybe you could show me something you think would be more suitable?" Carla asked, keeping her voice steady despite the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. The saleswoman tilted her head slightly, considering her response. She scanned Carla's appearance once again, her simple dress, her worn shoes, the absence of any flashy accessories, and then sighed. "Sure," she said with a note of impatience. "Let me show you something from the more reasonable section." Without waiting for Carla's response, the saleswoman turned and walked briskly toward a smaller display on the far side of the room. Carla followed, her thoughts racing. She couldn't help but wonder how many other customers, people who didn't look the part of the typical luxury shopper, had been treated this way. How many had walked through these doors, only to be judged and pushed aside, never given a fair chance. The saleswoman stopped in front of a case filled with less expensive jewelry, most of it still beautiful, but far from the high-end pieces that adorned the main displays. "This is where I'd suggest you start," she said, gesturing toward the items as if offering a great favor. "These are much more affordable." Carla looked at the jewelry, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let the silence hang between them, hoping the woman might realize the absurdity of her behavior. But the saleswoman remained unmoved, her expression as indifferent as ever. Carla felt the heat of embarrassment and anger rise in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She had to keep her composure. There was more to this test, and it wasn't time to reveal her true identity just yet. "Thank you," Carla said quietly, stepping back from the display. She gave the woman a polite nod, knowing full well that her patience was being stretched thin. The saleswoman merely raised an eyebrow, clearly disinterested in continuing the interaction. Carla walked away slowly, her mind swirling with thoughts of what she had just experienced. It was shocking, yes, but also deeply disappointing. These were her employees, people she had trusted to represent her brand, her vision. And yet, here they were, reducing her to nothing more than a stereotype, dismissing her worth based on appearances alone. She made her way to the shoe section next, trying to push down the frustration building inside her. She needed to gather more information, more insight into how her employees treated people like her, people who didn't fit the image of their ideal customer. As she reached for a pair of elegant heels, a male sales associate appeared beside her. He was tall, well-dressed, and wore a polite smile. Finally, someone who seemed willing to assist her. Carla felt a flicker of hope, but that hope quickly faded when the man spoke. "Ma'am," he said, his voice pleasant but condescending, "those shoes are from our exclusive collection. I'm not sure you'd be comfortable in them." Carla's hand froze midair. She turned to face the man, her eyes locking with his. There it was again, the same thinly veiled assumption, the same quiet judgment, wrapped in a smile but sharp enough to cut. "I'll decide what I'm comfortable in," Carla replied, her voice low but firm. The man blinked, clearly taken aback by her response, but he quickly recovered, offering her a strained smile. "Of course," he said, stepping back. "Let me know if you need anything." Carla's fingers brushed over the soft leather of the heels, but she no longer felt the same satisfaction in browsing her own products. Instead, the weight of the judgment she had faced so far pressed down on her, reminding her why she had come here in the first place. She wasn't done yet. After browsing through the shoe section and enduring yet another subtle dismissal, Carla found herself heading toward the private fitting rooms at the back of the store. The journey through her own boutique was becoming increasingly painful. Every interaction so far had confirmed her worst fears, that some of her employees were deeply prejudiced, and that those biases were influencing the way they treated people who didn't fit their narrow views of wealth and status. As she approached the fitting rooms, she overheard two saleswomen chatting quietly near the register. Their backs were turned to her, so they hadn't noticed her approaching. Carla slowed her pace, straining to hear their conversation. It wasn't long before her heart sank at what she overheard. "Did you see that woman who came in earlier?" One of the saleswomen whispered, her voice laced with derision. "The one in the cheap dress? I don't know what she's doing in here." The other woman laughed softly. "I know, right? She couldn't afford a keychain from this place. I don't understand why people like her even bother coming in. They're just wasting our time." Carla's breath caught in her throat. She felt a mix of sadness and anger, not just because of their words, but because they had no idea that the very person they were talking about was the owner of the store they worked for. The woman they were belittling had built this business from nothing, and now her employees were treating her like she didn't belong. Swallowing her pride, Carla quietly slipped into one of the fitting rooms, closing the door behind her. She sat down on a small bench, the world outside feeling heavy and distant. For the first time since she had entered the store that morning, the reality of what she was facing hit her fully. These people didn't see her as the successful entrepreneur she was. They saw only her skin color, her modest clothes, and they judged her for it. For a moment, Carla considered revealing herself, walking out there and telling them exactly who she was, confronting them with the truth of their ignorance. But she knew it wasn't the right time. This test wasn't over. There was more she needed to see, more she needed to learn about the attitudes simmering beneath the surface of her store. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, reminding herself why she had decided to do this in the first place. It wasn't just about catching her employees in the act of discrimination. It was about understanding the culture that had taken root in her business. It was about fixing what was broken, even if that meant tearing down everything she had built to start over. After a few minutes of quiet reflection, Carla stood up and straightened her dress. She wasn't going to let their words break her. There was work to be done, and she had always known that this wasn't going to be easy. Opening the door to the fitting room, she stepped out and was immediately greeted by the same two saleswomen she had overheard earlier. Their smiles were polite, But there was a flicker of recognition in their eyes. Recognition that was followed by a barely concealed look of disdain. "Do you need help with anything?" one of them asked, her tone overly sweet but clearly insincere. "No, thank you," Carla replied, keeping her voice calm and composed. "I was just leaving." The saleswoman exchanged a glance, but said nothing more as Carla walked past them. She could feel their eyes on her back, the weight of their judgment hanging in the air. It took everything in her not to turn around and confront them, but she knew that the time for that would come later, on her terms. As she made her way toward the exit, a wave of emotions washed over her. Anger, disappointment, sadness. It was all there, swirling inside her. But there was something else too, a sense of resolve. She had seen enough to know that changes needed to be made, and she was the only one who could make them. Before leaving the store, Carla paused by the window, looking out at the busy street. She watched as people passed by, some glancing at the boutique's elegant displays, others too absorbed in their own lives to notice. This was her world, the world she had fought to create, and now she realized how much work there still was to do. As she stepped out into the fresh air, the sounds of the city greeted her. Car horns, footsteps, the hum of conversation. It was a stark contrast to the cold, polished silence of the store she had just left behind. Carla walked slowly to her car, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had experienced that day. She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, but she also knew that this was her chance to make things right. Once inside her car, she sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The reflection staring back at her in the rearview mirror was one of determination. This wasn't just about one bad day in her store. It was about something much bigger, a chance to change the culture of her business, to set an example for others, and to prove that dignity and respect were not optional in her world. Carla started the engine, her mind already working through the steps she would need to take next. She wasn't going to let this slide. Tomorrow, she would return to the store, but this time as herself. Carla, the owner, the boss. And when she did, there would be no more pretending. It was time for her employees to face the consequences of their actions. As she drove away, the weight of the day slowly lifted, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. The test had been painful, but it had also given her clarity. Now, she knew exactly what needed to be done. The following morning, Carla woke up earlier than usual. The events of the previous day played over in her mind, and she couldn't help but feel a knot of anticipation tightening in her chest. Today was the day she would return to her boutique, but this time there would be no disguises, no tests, just the truth. Carla had always believed in leading with integrity, and today, her leadership would be put to the ultimate test. She would be walking into a business she had poured her heart and soul into, a business that had now become tainted by the very thing she had fought against her entire life, racism. She stood in front of her closet, considering her options. Today, there would be no modest dresses, no casual looks to mislead her employees. Today, she was showing up as the woman she truly was, strong, successful, and unapologetically herself. Carla reached for a tailored black suit, paired it with elegant heels, and finished the look with a statement necklace she'd worn for special occasions. Today, she was a woman on a mission. When she arrived at the store, the familiar scent of expensive perfumes greeted her as she walked through the door. The boutique was already bustling with the early morning staff prepping for the day, but when they saw her, the atmosphere changed. Carla could feel the shift immediately, the way their eyes widened in recognition, the way whispers began to ripple through the room. She was no longer just another customer. She was Carla Stevens, the owner and founder of this very boutique. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady but firm. There was a moment of silence before the employees murmured their responses, their uncertainty palpable. Carla didn't waste time. She had come here with a purpose, and that purpose was clear. She called a meeting, summoning every employee to the center of the store. As they gathered around her, she could see the faces of those she had encountered the day before. Some of them looked nervous, others confused, and a few had expressions of outright fear. "I'm sure many of you are wondering why I'm here today," Carla began, scanning the group. "I own this store, as you all know, and I've spent years building this brand into what it is today. But yesterday, I came here not as the owner, but as a customer. I want to see how my staff treats people who walk through these doors. And what I experienced was disappointing, to say the least." Her words hung in the air, and she could see the employees exchanging anxious glances. The saleswomen who had insulted her near the fitting rooms were standing near the back, their faces pale. Carla wasn't going to call them out by name, but she knew they recognized the gravity of the situation. "Let me be clear," she continued, her voice unwavering. "This store was built on principles of inclusivity, respect, and dignity. These are not optional values. They are the foundation of everything we do here. Yesterday, I saw firsthand how some of you treat customers who don't look like they belong in a store like this. And that's unacceptable." Carla paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. She could see the guilt and shame beginning to spread across some of their faces, but she wasn't finished. "I built this store for everyone," she said, her tone softening slightly but still carrying weight. "No matter where they come from, what they look like, or how they're dressed. If you can't understand that, then you don't belong here." There was a moment of silence before one of the saleswomen, a young woman named Jessica, who had been with the company for years, stepped forward. She looked visibly shaken. "Miss Stevens, she began, but Carla held up her hand, stopping her. "This isn't about excuses," Carla said firmly. "This is about accountability. And starting today, things are going to change around here. We will be implementing new training on customer service and sensitivity. And I want to make it clear that any behavior that goes against the values of this company will not be tolerated." The room remained silent. Carla could feel the tension thick in the air, but she also knew that this was necessary. She couldn't allow her employees to continue treating people the way they had treated her yesterday. Change needed to happen, and it needed to happen now. "Take today to reflect on what I've said," she concluded, her gaze sweeping across the group. "I expect everyone here to show up tomorrow with a new attitude. And if that's not something you're willing to do, then this isn't the right place for you." With that, Carla turned and walked toward her office at the back of the store. She could feel the weight of her employees' eyes on her as she moved, but she didn't turn back. She knew she had said what needed to be said. Inside her office, Carla sat down at her desk and took a deep breath. She had been dreading this moment, but now that it was over, she felt a sense of relief. The hardest part was done. Now it was time to rebuild, to make sure that her store truly reflected the values she had always stood for. Carla spent the rest of the day going over plans for the new training programs she would be implementing. She worked closely with her HR team, making sure that the new protocols would be rolled out as quickly as possible. There was no time to waste. The boutique's reputation and her own were on the line. As the day drew to a close, Carla felt a sense of calm settle over her. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. This wasn't just about saving her store. It was about making a statement that no matter how much success you achieve, you can never stop fighting for what's right. The next morning, Carla arrived at the store with a renewed sense of purpose. She had spent the previous night reviewing policies, drafting new guidelines, and preparing for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. As she stepped out of her car, the familiar sight of her boutique greeted her, sleek, elegant, and pristine. Yet now it symbolized more than just a successful business. It represented a place where change needed to happen. Inside the store, the atmosphere was tense. Employees were already gathered around the floor, tidying up displays and preparing for the day's clientele. There was a noticeable shift in their demeanor from the day before. They moved more carefully, stealing glances at Carla as she walked in. It was clear that her presence had shaken them, and the weight of what she had revealed the previous day still lingered in the air. Carla didn't waste time. She had scheduled a formal meeting with the entire staff to discuss the changes she planned to implement, and she wanted everyone on the same page. This wasn't just a one-off warning. This was a systemic overhaul that would redefine the culture of her boutique. Gathering everyone in the store's small break room, Carla stood at the front, her expression calm but serious. The room was full of familiar faces, some looking ashamed, others curious or even defensive. Among them were the two saleswomen from the fitting room, who stood near the back, their faces flushed with discomfort. "Good morning," Carla began, her voice carrying the weight of authority but laced with the same warmth she had always brought to her business. "I wanted to take some time today to address the situation head-on and to outline what will be happening moving forward. I know yesterday was difficult, and for many of you it was a shock, but it's a necessary step for us to become the kind of store we say we are." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The room was silent, every employee hanging on her words. "I've spent years building this boutique," Carla continued, "and I've always prided myself on running a business that values respect, diversity, and inclusion. But what I saw yesterday showed me that somewhere along the line, we've lost sight of those values. And I take full responsibility for that. As the owner, it's my job to make sure that this store reflects the principles I believe in. So, effective immediately, we're making some changes." Carla could see a few employees shifting nervously in their seats. She had anticipated this reaction. No one liked change, especially when it forced them to confront their own biases. But she pressed on, determined to set the tone for a new chapter in the store's history. "First," she said, "we will be implementing mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all employees. This is non-negotiable. Every single person who works here will be required to complete this training, and it will be an ongoing process, not just a one-time session. We need to ensure that our staff is educated on how to treat every customer with the respect they deserve, regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived social status." There were a few murmurs from the group, but Carla didn't let it distract her. She moved on to the next point. "Second, I will be closely monitoring how we interact with customers. We will have anonymous feedback options available for clients to report any mistreatment or discrimination they experience while shopping here. I want to make sure that every person who walks through these doors feels valued and welcome." Carla could feel the tension in the room growing. Some employees looked uncomfortable, clearly grappling with the idea that their behavior might be under scrutiny. But this was exactly what Carla had expected and hoped for. Change wasn't meant to be comfortable. "Lastly," Carla said, her tone softening just a little, "I want to emphasize that this isn't about punishing anyone. This is about growth. We all have biases, myself included, and it's important that we acknowledge them so that we can work on overcoming them. This is an opportunity for all of us to learn and become better. And if anyone feels that they can't align with these new standards, then I'll understand if you choose to move on. But know that from today forward, this store will reflect the values I built it on." For a few moments, the room was silent. Carla could see the internal struggles playing out on some of her employees' faces. Then, finally, Jessica, the young woman who had attempted to speak the day before, raised her hand. "Ms. Stevens," Jessica began cautiously, "I just wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday. I was one of the people who didn't treat you the way I should have, and I'm really sorry. I didn't realize." Carla nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate your apology. But more than that, I appreciate that you're willing to acknowledge your mistake. That's the first step toward change." Jessica looked relieved, though her shoulders remained tense. Carla could tell that this was difficult for her, and for many of the others in the room. But that was the point. Confronting uncomfortable truths was never easy. "I don't expect anyone to be perfect," Carla continued, her voice gentle but firm. "What I do expect is that we make a conscious effort to do better. To be better. This is a process, and we'll take it one step at a time. But we will get there." As the meeting drew to a close, Carla felt a mixture of emotions: relief, hope, but also a sense of resolve. The road ahead was going to be long, and not everyone would stay with her for the journey. She knew that some employees might choose to leave, unwilling or unable to adapt to the new standards she was setting. But that was okay. She needed a team that believed in the same values she did, and she was willing to rebuild if necessary. After the meeting, Carla returned to her office, feeling the weight of the morning's conversation still lingering in the air. But there was also a sense of peace. She had taken the first step toward righting the wrong she had witnessed, and now it was up to her staff to follow through. Later that afternoon, as the boutique filled with customers, Carla watched her employees closely. There was still tension, but there was also a noticeable shift in how they interacted with the clients. She saw more smiles, more engagement, and a renewed effort to treat every customer with care. It was a start, a small one, but a start nonetheless. And as Carla stood at the window of her office, looking out at the bustling store below, she knew that this was just the beginning of the transformation. Change wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and she was ready to lead the way. In the weeks that followed the meeting, the changes Carla implemented began to take shape. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but slowly, the boutique's atmosphere shifted. Employees were more mindful of their interactions, and the clients, especially those who might have felt overlooked before, noticed the difference. Carla remained hands-on throughout the process. She made sure to be present in the store daily, observing her staff and interacting with customers. Her employees, though initially apprehensive, began to appreciate her presence. It was clear to them that she wasn't there just to scrutinize. She was there to guide and help them grow. Jessica, who had been one of the first to apologize during the staff meeting, was particularly keen to improve. She started asking more questions, learning about the different needs of customers, especially those who had different tastes or cultural preferences. It was as if the meeting had unlocked a part of her that wanted to do better, not just because it was required, but because she truly believed in the changes Carla was making. The first major test came when a group of women, dressed modestly and speaking quietly in a language that wasn't English, walked into the boutique. Carla noticed a few hesitant glances from the staff, and her heart tightened momentarily. But before she could intervene, she watched Jessica step forward with a warm smile. "Welcome. How can I help you today?" Jessica's voice was friendly and genuine. The women seemed surprised by the warm reception, exchanging glances before one of them responded in broken English. "Just looking, thank you." "Of course. Take your time," Jessica said, gesturing around the store. Carla felt a surge of pride. It was a simple interaction, but it represented so much more. Jessica had made an effort to treat the women with respect, not assuming anything about them based on their appearance or language. And it wasn't just Jessica. Carla noticed other employees following suit, showing more attentiveness and care with every customer who walked through the door. As word of mouth spread, the boutique began attracting a more diverse clientele. Customers who had once felt excluded by the store's previous atmosphere now felt comfortable shopping there. Carla received emails and messages from customers who shared how their experiences at the boutique had improved, thanking her for the changes she had made. But it wasn't just the customers who were affected. The employees themselves began to feel the ripple effect of the new culture. The training sessions Carla had mandated were eye-opening for many of them, sparking conversations about race, privilege, and bias that they had never considered before. One afternoon, Carla found herself in the break room with a few of her employees, taking a rare moment to relax between appointments. The conversation turned to the diversity training they had completed. "I didn't realize how much I'd been conditioned to think in certain ways," one of the employees admitted. "I always thought of myself as open-minded, but there were so many things I hadn't even noticed about how I interact with people." Carla nodded. "It's not easy to confront those things, but it's important. We all have blind spots." Jessica, who was also in the room, chimed in. "Honestly, I was embarrassed at first. I kept thinking about that day when I ignored you, Miss Stevens. I just didn't see you as someone who would be a customer here, and that's my own bias. I've been working hard to change that." Carla smiled. "And I've noticed you've been doing great." The conversation continued, and Carla could feel a sense of camaraderie building among her staff. They were no longer just colleagues working a job. They were part of something bigger. They were helping to create a space where everyone, regardless of their background or appearance, could feel valued. However, not everyone adapted as easily. A few employees struggled with the changes. One of the saleswomen from the initial incident, Sophia, was particularly resistant. While she outwardly complied with the new policies, Carla could tell that Sophia wasn't fully on board. Her interactions with customers were polite, but they lacked the warmth and genuine engagement that Carla expected. It came to a head one afternoon when Carla overheard a conversation between Sophia and another employee. They were in the stockroom, unaware that Carla was nearby. "I just don't see why all this is necessary," Sophia was saying, her voice low but frustrated. "I've been working here for years, and we've always had a certain type of clientele. Now we're supposed to cater to everyone? It's just not realistic." The other employee, clearly uncomfortable, mumbled something in response, but Carla didn't wait to hear more. She stepped into the stockroom, her presence immediately silencing the conversation. "Sophia," Carla said, her tone calm but firm, "I think we need to have a conversation." Sophia's face flushed, and she quickly tried to recover. "Miss Stevens, I didn't mean—" "I know exactly what you meant," Carla interrupted. "And I appreciate that this has been a big adjustment for everyone. But if you can't get on board with the direction this store is going, then we need to talk about whether this is the right place for you." Sophia looked stunned. "You'd fire me? After all these years?" "This isn't about firing you," Carla said. "It's about whether you can align with the values we're building here. I've made it clear that this store is for everyone. If you can't embrace that, then maybe it's time for you to find a place that better suits your vision." There was a long silence. Carla could see the emotions playing out on Sophia's face: anger, fear, and perhaps a little regret. But Carla stood firm. This was no longer just a business decision. It was personal. She couldn't allow anyone to undermine the culture of inclusion she was fostering. "I'll think about it," Sophia finally said, her voice quiet. Carla nodded. "Please do." As she walked out of the stockroom, Carla felt a wave of exhaustion. Confronting these issues wasn't easy, but she knew it was necessary. The boutique had to be a place where everyone, staff and customers alike, felt respected and valued. And she would continue fighting for that, no matter how difficult the road ahead. That evening, as Carla closed the store, she reflected on the day. Change was happening slowly but surely. And while there were still challenges to face, she felt more confident than ever that she was on the right path. As the boutique continued to grow, both in reputation and clientele, Carla realized that the next phase of her plan would test not just the loyalty of her employees, but their true commitment to the store's new vision. Word of the changes she'd implemented had spread, attracting the attention of some prominent figures in the local business world. One day, Carla received a call from a well-known fashion influencer, Lauren Miller, who expressed interest in visiting the boutique and featuring it on her popular social media platform. Lauren was known for promoting high-end fashion, and her endorsement could take Carla's store to the next level. Carla was excited about the opportunity, but there was one catch. Lauren's reputation for being controversial preceded her. She had been involved in several public incidents where she had made insensitive remarks, particularly about race and class. Some of Carla's friends warned her about associating with someone like Lauren, but the businesswoman in Carla couldn't ignore the potential boost this visit could bring. A few days later, Lauren arrived at the boutique, flanked by an entourage of assistants and photographers. Her entrance was grand and loud, turning heads as she stepped through the door in oversized sunglasses and an extravagant outfit. Carla greeted her warmly, doing her best to remain professional despite her reservations. "We're so glad to have you here, Lauren," Carla said, extending her hand. "Thanks, darling. I've heard amazing things about this place," Lauren replied, her smile wide, but her eyes scanning the store with an air of superiority. As Lauren and her team moved through the boutique, filming and taking pictures for her social media feed, Carla couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her gut. She observed how Lauren interacted with the staff, demanding, dismissive, and at times condescending. Her behavior reminded Carla of the very culture she had worked so hard to change in her store. At one point, Lauren turned to Jessica, who had been assigned to assist her during the visit. "Do you have anything in a larger size? These pieces are cute, but I'm not seeing anything that would fit my curves." Jessica, maintaining her professionalism, responded with a smile. "Of course, I'd be happy to show you some options that might work for you." "Good, because I don't want to waste my time here," Lauren said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Carla watched the interaction closely. While Jessica handled the situation with grace, it was clear that Lauren's attitude was grating on her. It wasn't just the dismissive comments about size. It was the underlying sense of entitlement that Lauren exuded, as if she believed the world revolved around her. But what happened next was something Carla hadn't anticipated. Lauren was standing by the jewelry display, trying on an expensive necklace when one of her assistants whispered something in her ear. Without even glancing up, Lauren handed the necklace to Jessica and said, "Can you put this back for me, dear?" Jessica, who had been patient up until this point, hesitated for just a moment before responding. "Actually, ma'am, we have a policy that all jewelry must be returned to its designated area by the customer for security reasons." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Lauren's face hardened as she slowly turned to Jessica. "Excuse me? Are you seriously telling me to put this back myself? Do you know who I am?" Jessica stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. "I understand, Ms. Miller, but those are the store's policies. I'm happy to assist you in any other way." Carla felt her heart race. This was a pivotal moment. Jessica was asserting herself, not out of disrespect, but to uphold the values and policies Carla had put in place. But she knew how someone like Lauren would interpret it. Lauren's entourage fell silent, sensing the tension. For a moment, it seemed like Lauren might explode in anger. But instead, she did something unexpected. She smiled, though it was cold and condescending, and handed the necklace back to Jessica. "Fine. I guess rules are rules, right?" Lauren said with a sharp edge in her voice. "But don't expect me to come back here. I prefer places where the staff knows how to treat their VIPs." She turned on her heel, motioning for her team to follow. As they left the boutique, Carla could feel the tension in the air slowly dissipate. The employees exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. Jessica stood frozen for a moment, her face a mask of professionalism, but Carla could see the strain beneath it. Once Lauren and her entourage were gone, Carla approached Jessica. "You handled that perfectly," she said softly. Jessica let out a long breath. "I didn't think she was going to listen. Honestly, I thought she was going to throw a fit." Carla smiled. She's not used to people standing up to her. But you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Thank you for that. Jessica nodded, a small smile of relief spreading across her face. I just didn't want to let her walk all over us. And you didn't. You stood up for our values, and that's what matters. The incident with Lauren, though tense, had reaffirmed to Carla that the changes she had made were worth it. Her employees were no longer just following orders. They were protecting the culture they had built together. And in doing so, they were setting an example for the type of customers they wanted to attract. Later that evening, as Carla sat in her office reflecting on the day, she received an email notification. To her surprise, it was from Lauren Miller. The subject line simply read, "Apologies." Curious, Carla opened the email and read, "Carla, I wanted to reach out and apologize for my behavior earlier today. I've had time to reflect on how I treated your staff, and I realize now that I was in the wrong. Your employee, Jessica, showed a level of professionalism that I didn't deserve, and I respect that. I understand if you'd prefer not to collaborate in the future, but I wanted to extend my apologies nonetheless. Best, Lauren Miller." Carla stared at the screen, a mixture of surprise and satisfaction washing over her. It wasn't the kind of apology she had expected, but it was a step in the right direction. Even someone like Lauren Miller, who was used to having the world at her feet, had been forced to acknowledge that things were changing. Carla smiled to herself. The boutique had passed its biggest test yet. Weeks had passed since the visit from Lauren Miller, and while the boutique had continued to thrive, Carla couldn't stop reflecting on how far she had come. The store had not only transformed into a respected luxury brand, but had also become a symbol of what could be achieved through perseverance, integrity, and a commitment to justice. It was a typical Friday morning when Carla entered the boutique. As always, she greeted her staff with a warm smile, feeling the pride that came from knowing they had all contributed to the boutique's success. Jessica, as diligent as ever, was helping a new client who had heard about the boutique's unique collection from an article in a major fashion magazine. The store was bustling, and everything seemed to be moving seamlessly. Just as Carla was settling into her office, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something told her to answer. "Hello, Carla speaking," she answered, her voice calm and composed. "Hello, Mrs. Wells? This is Linda Johnson from the Global Fashion Excellence Awards," the voice on the other end said brightly. "I'm calling with some exciting news." Carla's heart skipped a beat. The Global Fashion Excellence Awards were one of the most prestigious recognitions in the fashion world, an award given to only a handful of top-tier luxury brands each year. She couldn't imagine what they could want with her, but she listened intently. "I'm delighted to inform you that your boutique, Elegance Redefined, has been selected as one of the finalists for the Innovator of the Year award," Linda continued. "We've been following the incredible transformation of your store, particularly the way you've created a luxury experience while promoting inclusivity and diversity. We would love for you to attend our gala in New York next month, where we'll be announcing the winners." Carla was stunned. For a moment, she couldn't find the words. The boutique had always been her dream, but to be recognized on this level was something beyond what she had ever imagined. "Wow, thank you. I don't know what to say," Carla finally responded, her voice filled with emotion. "We're thrilled to have you as part of the finalists, Carla. You've made waves in the industry, and people are starting to take notice. We'll send you all the details about the event. Congratulations again." As Carla hung up the phone, she sat in her office chair, absorbing the news. She had always believed in her vision for the store, but to see it acknowledged on such a grand stage was overwhelming. And yet, it felt like a natural progression, a testament to all the hard work, sacrifices, and challenges she had faced. Later that afternoon, Carla gathered the staff for an impromptu meeting in the boutique's main showroom. The employees exchanged curious glances as Carla stood before them, holding her hands together, a soft smile playing on her lips. I have some exciting news, she began. Thanks to all of you and the incredible work we've done together, Elegance Redefined has been selected as a finalist for the Global Fashion Excellence Awards. The room erupted in cheers and applause. The employees were beaming with pride, hugging one another and exchanging excited whispers. Jessica, standing near the back, had tears in her eyes. She had been with the store through its toughest times and had seen firsthand how far they had come. Carla took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. I just want to say how proud I am of each and every one of you, she continued. This store wouldn't be where it is today without your dedication and belief in what we're building. We've faced challenges, but we've always stood by our values. And now, the world is taking notice. As the celebration continued, Carla stepped outside the boutique for a moment of quiet reflection. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets. She thought about the first day she had stepped into her store, filled with hope and determination, unaware of the trials that lay ahead. She had faced racism, ignorance, and doubt, but she had also found strength in her own identity and in the people around her. Carla's thoughts drifted back to that day when she had walked into her own store, unrecognized and mistreated by her own employees. It was a painful experience, but one that had sparked a necessary change, not just in her store, but in herself. She was no longer just the owner of a luxury boutique. She was a leader, a role model, and a symbol of what it meant to break barriers in a world that often tried to keep people like her on the outside. As Carla stood there, lost in thought, a familiar voice called her name. Carla, there you are. It was Madeline, her oldest and closest friend, walking toward her with a wide grin on her face. Madeline had been there from the beginning, encouraging Carla to pursue her dream when it felt impossible. I heard the news, Madeline exclaimed, hugging Carla tightly. This is amazing. I'm so proud of you. Carla smiled, feeling the warmth of her friend's support. Thank you, Maddie. I can hardly believe it myself. You've earned it, Madeline said, stepping back to look at Carla. You've worked so hard, and you've stayed true to who you are. That's why people respect you. Carla nodded, her eyes misting with emotion. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Madeline glanced at the boutique's glowing sign, the words Elegance Redefined shining brightly against the evening sky. You've redefined more than just elegance, Carla. You've redefined what it means to succeed. The two women stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as people walked in and out of the boutique, drawn to the store's inviting atmosphere and impeccable reputation. The world had changed, at least in this small corner of it, and Carla knew that there was still more work to be done. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the triumph of the moment. She had done it. Against all odds, Carla had turned her dream into a reality, not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been told she didn't belong. Elegance Redefined wasn't just a store. It was a statement, a movement, and a beacon of hope. And this was only the beginning.